we're going to be covering weight loss, the hot topic. We're going to try and reframe the subject from a historical point of view, educate you guys on creating a lifestyle that you can follow and not play the yo-yo game, because that is depressing and we don't want you doing that. So, how you guys doing tonight?
Good. This is the topic, the culture needs in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And like we talked, so this is part 2.
Mm-hmm.
We'll kind of give a quick recap after this on part 1, but we did touch on how Joe and I lost some weight, our journey on that. So you'll want to check that out, because we're not just talking about something we haven't had to do.
No.
Dave, on the other hand, he's more on the weight gain.
I'm on the
which
opposite side of the spectrum.
Which is a relevant conversation in this too, because especially on the macronutrient side, so we get in there on how weight gain can work. But I guess we can, to just recap, Joe, what did we go over last time?
So we went over the issue here, guys, cleared up some history, the idea of why the body holds fat in the first place, went over scarcity, starvation, a lot of the recent, if you haven't been familiar with that, we do have famines. There's a recent one in Somalia, actually 2024. So if you guys can get an idea for the framing, we're just trying to frame the subject from a historical place, broaden the frame from the Western frame of, having our excess foods and living in an echo chamber that a lot of people do in weight loss. So we go over some of the confusion here as well, and then body types, ectomorph, endomorph, mesomorph, how there's more of a combination between, no one's really just a pure endomorph or pure ectomorph. There's usually some type of a blend between a meso and an endo, or a meso and an ecto. Then we went over genetics. This is a very important topic for you guys to understand, because your genetics are you are the result, you are the product of generations of breeding. And what your ancestors ate are going to directly impact your genetics for what you should eat in your diet. So we went over the 23andMe. I actually just got that test.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I got it last week, so I'm excited to get it and then see what my genetics are.
Yeah,
because I'm half Colombian, a quarter Sicilian, and a quarter Romanian. And my dad took the test. He's a Sicilian and a Romanian, and he came back Greek, like almost like full, like I think he's 80% Greek, which is like Phoenician descent, which is from the Canaanites, as a matter of fact. Phoenicians came from the Canaanites, ancient Greeks, before the Greeks. So check out your genetics, see what they're like, and understand the relation of the latitude of the region that your genetics are from. Say if you're in a region, you're farther north, you're going to be eating a lot more fats, because animals tend to hold fat for the wintertime. There's going to be less fruit trees growing up north because of the lack of sun and the harsher winter times. You're going to have a freeze. Plants don't like freezes. We know that in Florida. They cover all the fruit trees, orange trees. So your ability to digest carbohydrates is going to be, if you're from the northern hemispheres, is going to be a lot different. It's going to be harder for you to digest carbs than it will be from somebody from the south or closer to the equator. That could be the north if you're in the southern continents, like in South America. They have more fruits over there, so they're going to be able to digest carbohydrates easier.
And I wouldn't view that stuff as like set in stone, because we got so much interbreeding going on. There's
right.
But I would, to just like take an extreme, like the Eskimos, like in their family lines, probably aren't going to go digest a bunch of carbs very well.
No.
And someone who's lived their whole life on the Mediterranean, they're probably not going to eat whale, like a carnivore diet, and survive really well either, or their body's just not going to like it.
Exactly, because they don't metabolize the fats. And there's a study actually that I pulled up on PubMed, and I kind of added it to the document. The GWAS, Genome-Wide Association studies, and they were actually studying the cardiac problems, and some genetics actually produce. We've all heard of LDL, which is the bad cholesterol. Your body turns LDL into HDL. And for people that live up north, they have a higher proclivity to turn LDL into HDL because they live in the north, they consume more fat. So their body's used to taking that LDL and turning it into HDL. So when you live down south, and you can see these are some Southern European, East Asian, African, Hispanic populations tend to have a lot more trouble and higher cholesterol, LDL, therefore suffer from more of the cardiac issues because they have higher fat diets now. They're eating a lot more fried foods, etc., and they're not used to doing that typically. So their bodies don't convert the LDL and the HDL as well. So there's a lot more LDL just circulating in the bloodstream.
Then we hit on the relationship with food, nature versus nurture.
Mm-hmm. How you're grown up, your genetics. Were you raised in a family where it was very healthy eating? Your parents cooked food every day. It was fresh food. Or were you raised in your fruit roll-up, Pepsi, and TV dinner family where you sat around watching movies and were very inactive? And that's going to affect your relationship with food. We also talked about trauma eating, people that eat it to feel better. There's a couple of cool stories I wrote here, just about the way God made things. You know, if you forget the purpose of eating, eating is enjoyable, just like sex is, just like a lot of our bodily functions, they tend to be enjoyable. But if we forget the purpose and we start using them for just pleasure, then we end up being very frustrated.
And that brings us to today's topic, which we're starting off with what? The macronutrients and calories, specifically carbohydrates.
That's right. Yes, Mike. So the building blocks of food, nutrition, in a in the macronutrients, and this is where we're going to start straight up with the hot topic: is calories in, calories out. Now, this is a simple equation that has many variations. However, the rule is if you consume more calories than you burn, you will gain weight, muscle, and or fat. If you burn more calories than you consume, you will lose weight. Again, muscle and or fat. Something cannot be created out of nothing unless you have the power of the Almighty. What to eat? Whole foods that need to be cooked, that expire, that have few ingredients, and that people generally have been consuming for hundreds of years is a great rule of thumb. Stay away from long shelf life foods, new Frankenstein foods we have not historically eaten, like seed oils or high fructose corn syrup. When is the last time historically people squished corn and vegetables for oil? Last 60 years, 50 years. Humans have been eating animal fats, butter, nuts, avocados, olives, coconuts as a fat source for hundreds of years, so they're a safe bet. Canned foods and some dehydrated foods are an exception, as they say, for long shelf life food, but fresh is generally best. If it needs to be cooked, peeled, refrigerated, or eaten raw, and has been eaten for hundreds of years, it's probably a safe bet.
Thousands of years.
Thousands of years, yeah.
I think like when you go shopping, I think about this like if I go to Walmart shopping or whatever, they have like basically, you know, fruits and vegetables, meats, dairy, cheese, everything. It's all on like the outside, like along the wall.
Oh, yeah. Shannon brings this up.
Yeah. And then in the middle rows is all your like brightly colored packaged, you know, just processed junk. And so it's like just avoid the center section of the whole grocery area and just shop on the outside. You're probably good to go.
Yeah.
And if you can like read the ingredients list, if you know the words in the ingredients list, you're probably also fine.
Yes. That's a great, just simplified way to approach most grocery stores. And Brother Shannon used to bring that up quite a bit. I think it's
shop on the edges.
Shop on the edges. That's where the fresh stuff's at. Apart from the freezer aisles in the middle, there could be some all right stuff in there. Okay, so macronutrients are the basic building blocks of life, of food. Excuse me. So you guys have heard of macronutrients. I'm sure you've heard of them all over in all the diets. Macronutrients, if you can think about food, what we're going to be doing today is funneling it down into its bits and pieces. So God creates animals and vegetables and all these wonderful sources of nutrients for us to eat. And then we take those and then we either process them down into different types of foods. And then we process them further by cooking them ourselves at home. And then we process them even further by masticating them in our mouth with the saliva, start digestion right there. And then we process them further inside of our stomachs. We digest them, gastric acids go in there. And then we process them into even smaller bits in our small intestines where they finally get absorbed into their smallest, most absorbable particles and then shuttled away into the rest of our body and cells. So imagine this big funnel. We're starting off with the big three right now, your macronutrients. Started off first with calories, and now we're macronutrient. Okay? So what do we got here, Mike?
So based on your genetics, you may be able to eat more or less carbs.
Wait. Tell us what they are.
Oh, proteins, carbs, and fats.
Right. And how many calories for each of those?
We got 4 calories per gram of protein,
Mm-hmm.
4 calories per gram of carb, 9 calories per gram of fat.
Right.
Okay. I was wondering what that meant at first.
Yep. So fats are more than double
Yeah.
protein and carbs. Carbs the same as protein. Both of them can be rocking 4 calories per gram.
Based on your genetics, you may be able to eat more or less carbs and sugars or fats and proteins. Some people do very well on a carnivore diet, not so well, and others not so well, and do better on Mediterranean, for example. This difference is usually due to your genetic background and propensity to digest certain macronutrients better than others. Remember, you are a cumulative product of generations breeding, and what your ancestors' diet consisted of will have a bearing on what works best for your diet. So, to get into the carbohydrates, today's main topic. Carbs made up of fibers, starches, and sugars. Sugar made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen comes in a few forms. What is that?
Monosaccharides.
Monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides, oligosaccharides.
Very good.
Saccharine comes from the Greek word saccharon, which means sugar. The prefix of mono, di, poly, and oligo tells us how many sugars are present in a carbohydrate. For instance, a disaccharide would be 2 sugars because the di stands for 2 and saccharides for sugars. Glucose is the main sugar. It is the building block of all different kinds of sugars that we will discuss further below. Glucose is what your body converts into glycogen. Glucose is what your body converts glycogen into after being stored in your body for energy use. Glucose is pretty much instant energy. Our bodies need to do very little processing to convert glucose into energy or to be stored as fat. To give you an idea, if you find yourself in the hospital suffering from dehydration or low blood sugar, doctors will put an IV containing dextrose, identical to glucose, to bring your blood sugars up.
Right. So
with those other words, what's glucose then? Is it a disaccharide?
saccharide is a sugar. So yeah, glucose. Let me explain this. So when you think about sugars, remember digestion, guys. We're all constantly breaking apart bonds, molecular bonds, chemical bonds between sugars. So glucose is a monosaccharide. That means it's a single sugar, right? Disaccharides are 2 sugars that have been connected together with a chemical bond. Polysaccharides could be multiple sugars with a chemical bond. All right. So it takes longer to digest more complex sugars and more complex, what we call complex sugars or complex carbohydrates. So remember, that's the point of knowing about this. We're going to get into this right now with how fast glucose hits your bloodstream. And glucose, when you hear people like they've been in the gym for a while working out, they're like, "Oh yeah, my glycogen stores are low." So when you consume sugars, your body turns it into glucose, and then that glucose gets shuttled over to the muscle,
Glycogen
and then it's stored as glycogen,
Okay.
and then that little glycogen gets released as glucose again. All right, give you an idea of how it works and what people mean when they say glycogen is low.
That's where sometimes you have the little bodybuilders eating a candy bar after the workout.
Yeah, they want to shuttle in nutrients immediately, or endurance athletes. They will oftentimes eat very high sugary. They just want immediate energy. Your body can metabolize that very quick, which is the GI scale, which we're going to get into right now.
Take it, Dave.
Types of simple sugars. Glucose, a monosaccharide, Greek monos meaning single, saccharine meaning sugar, is a simple sugar. Glucose is the type of sugar found in blood, and it is stored in the body as glycogen. Dextrose is also a simple sugar and is the name given to sugars derived from starches, usually corn. Glucose and dextrose are biochemically identical. Dextrose scores 100 on the glycemic index, like glucose, and raises blood glucose levels very rapidly, but is 20% less sweet than glucose, rated 100 on GI scales.
So you might be asking yourself, like, why would someone use dextrose instead of glucose? So endurance athletes run marathons and they're chugging Gatorade and these eating sweet bars, and they get their sweet tooth gets exhausted, and they want to go for something like dextrose, which has a much lower sweetness index. So Same GI scale. It's going to get absorbed into your body the same way and converted into glycogen for you to use, but it won't taste as sweet. And that's why a lot of bodybuilders use in their intra-workout instead of using like, Gatorade, which is going to affect the same way. But when you hear glucose, dextrose, and some bodybuilders are like, oh, dextrose is so much different than glucose. It's more of just, fantasy for these guys. They think it works better, it tastes different, therefore it must be different, but molecularly they are identical. They just don't taste as sweet. Sweetness is not an indicator of calorie or the GI scale.
Mm-hmm.
It's not.
Fructose is a monosaccharide. It is the primary sugar found in plants and fruit. The most fruits and veggies are a combination of sucrose, a disaccharide consisting of joined glucose and fructose sugar, and fructose and glucose in their unbound separate forms. The higher the fructose content, the sweeter the fruit or veggie will be. This is why fructose is associated with fruits, because they are sweeter than other veggies, and they are rated 23 on the GI scale. Sucrose is a monosaccharide. It is found in vegetables and fruits and is what we commonly refer to as table sugar. Sucrose is a double sugar with a 1-to-1 ratio of glucose and fructose that are chemically bonded together. Sucrose, or table sugar, is commonly derived from sugarcane or sugar beets, probably the worst for your teeth because of the proliferation of the Streptococcus mutans bacteria that converts into a sticky coating on your teeth, forming plaque, and that is rated 65 on the GI scale. Galactose is a monosaccharide or milk sugar found in milk. This sugar promotes fat mobilization by forcing the mitochondria to be active, thereby enhancing an oxidative metabolism, which increases fat burning, and that is rated 23 on the GI scale.
High fructose corn syrup.
High fructose corn syrup is a mixture of two monosaccharide sugars, fructose and glucose, which is derived from cornstarch and contains nearly equivalent amounts of glucose and fructose, ranging from 45 to 58% and 42 to 55%, respectively. And that is rated 62 to 68 on the GI scale.
So there's a lot of talk about, high fructose corn syrup, and does the body even recognize it? And I used to be one of those people that thought it was like a demon. But the reason why they made it is because they wanted a sweeter corn syrup, because the corn syrup was made out of glucose predominantly, and fructose tastes sweeter. So they wanted to use less of it or have a sweeter product for people to bake with and to cook with. So that was the reason for making high fructose corn syrup.
I've heard. Is there anything truth? I've heard like fructose stores as fat, like worse than other sugars. Kind of heard some rumblings on that online. You heard anything about that?
People have their hypotheses on, how sugar is metabolized, but your body uses glycogen. So if you're going to use glycogen, if you're going to eat glycogen, it makes sense that it would store that easier as fat. It's the speed at which it is stored and which it is metabolized. When you think about digestion, you think about how fast can the body absorb something and use it. How little effort does it have to use to shuttle nutrients to the cells? That's what makes something easier to absorb and more prone to be stored as fat.
Sweetness and calories.
Sweetness doesn't equate to calories. Fructose is the gold standard for sweetness and is about 2 times sweeter than sucrose. This is why high fructose corn syrup was invented, to make corn syrup sweeter. Good old corn syrup is 100% glucose, so it makes it sweeter. So they make it sweeter by adding an enzyme to the corn syrup to convert some of the glucose into fructose. As far as sweetness goes, fructose rules. After fructose, you get into the mind-bending territory of sucralose, 300 times fructose, or lugdanum, 115,000 times sweeter than fructose. Quick, fun fact. And this kind of goes into the genetics and where you're born and what you eat. Certain carnivores cannot taste sweetness, like the bottlenose dolphin, sea lions, spotted hyenas, and fossas, a small cougar-like cat that lives in Madagascar. You can't imagine there being many fruit trees in the ocean for bottlenose dolphins to taste test. There's not anything sweet. That's why you have the sea lions, and there's nothing sweet for them to eat there. Their bodies have no idea what sweetness is, therefore. So your environment has a lot to do with that, or your nature. What is a GI scale? You've heard us talk about this. I end every single sugar outline with the GI scale. Why is this important? It stands for glycemic index. Why is this important? Because it tells us how fast a kind of sugar causes our blood sugar to rise, or how fast a specific sugar is absorbed. The more complex a sugar is, the longer it takes to absorb, because the body must break down, digest the chemical bonds holding multiple sugar molecules together to absorb them. That, in essence, is digestion, the breaking down of foods into smaller absorbable nutrients. So the more complex sugars like disaccharides, polysaccharides, oligosaccharides, in conjunction with the fiber and the starch content of a food, will equate to the longer digestion and therefore slower absorption. This also means your body uses more effort, energy, calories in digestion. So I'm going to take, for example, a sweet potato. Okay. This sweet potato is bound in fiber. The sugars are then held together by starches in the sweet potato. Our body has to work through and take apart. First, you bite up that sweet potato, you masticate it, goes into your stomach. Then your stomach works on breaking apart those starchy bonds, right? Pretty soon it's like a little bit of a paste. It's in smaller particles. Those particles, we start to take the starch away from the sugar, and then those sugars, whether they're polysaccharide, disaccharide, monosaccharides, they start to get pulled apart, their chemical bonds, into smaller bits and then digested. So that's what we mean by complex carbs. Literally, it's more complex for your body to digest a sweet potato because of the fiber, the starch, and the different sugars in there than it would to be sucking down a Gatorade, which is just straight up sucrose, which is a glucose and a fructose molecule. It's very easy for it to part those two molecules and digest that very rapidly, meaning it won't take your body much effort to do that, which is why when you eat protein, you tend to have a thermal index, a thermal overload, because your body has to work very hard to digest protein, has to go through the liver, and you burn calories to digest protein, and you burn more calories to digest a sweet potato than you would a Gatorade. So think about the difference between oil and gasoline. You must take a blowtorch to oil for a good while to ignite it. Lots of energy and time. But it burns long and slow and is relatively controllable because of its low combustion rate, which is why we used to use oil in our houses back in the day. Gasoline, on the other hand, just needs a whiff of a flame or a spark to ignite, and it burns very fast and hot because it is highly combustible, which is why we use it in engines. Oil is like sweet potatoes, rice, barley, grain, roots. Takes more effort, energy to break down or digest, burning calories in the process. It burns longer and slower as it takes more time and effort to digest into absorbable glucose. Gasoline is like high fructose corn syrup, fruits, table sugar, anything that's outright sweet or high in simple sugars. These foods are easily digestible and therefore quickly absorbed with minimal effort and energy on your body's part. Stick with complex carbs for the bulk of your diet and sprinkle in some fruits. Remember, this depends on your genetic propensity to digest certain sugars. Desserts and high fructose corn syrup are fine in moderation. The best time to eat simple sugars is after a workout to replenish depleted glycogen stores as quickly as possible. I often eat the bulk of my carbs with dinner because of the sleepy time effects insulin produces, as it is used to shuttle sugars from the bloodstream into the cells. Nice little hack there. I use it all the time. I usually eat the bulk of my carbs at night. Helps me go to bed. If you want to eat your Gatorade or eat some fruits or some sugary stuff after workouts, a really good time to do that.
All right, now we're moving over to fiber,
which is a carbohydrate, guys.
Yep. Fiber is also counted as a carbohydrate that the body cannot digest into glucose. Fiber is broken down into two groups: soluble, dissolves in water, and insoluble, doesn't dissolve in water. Insoluble fibers are used for bulking up stool and laxative effects because it's literally cleaning your pipes by not breaking down. It holds its form all the way till the end, bringing everything with it. Bulking stool. Cellulose, hemicellulose, lignins, psyllium, psyllium are all non-soluble and will build great turds for your toilet. Soluble fibers can help with bulking stool and a laxative effect, but are better used as a prebiotic for your probiotics to eat. Probiotics are little bugs that make up your gut microbiome or gut flora that are essential for proper function of digestion and many other mechanisms of the body, like serotonin, 90% of which can be found in the cells lining your gastrointestinal tract. You will see most prebiotics have insulin, oligosaccharide, oligofructose, what that is
fructooligosaccharides.
these words are just made up.
Yeah.
Or a combination of these, which probiotics love to eat. Other soluble fiber includes pectin, resistant starch, gum, beta-glucans, polydextrose, and polyols. As you can see, fiber won't add to your calories per se and will have quite the opposite effect, as the body has to work hard to move them through digestion, helping keep you regular. Fiber will also make your body much healthier and more efficient by feeding your gut microbiome. Fiber also has a stabilizing effect on blood glucose level and cholesterol. I have personally experimented with this and was able to lower my cholesterol 60 points with a high fiber diet. And then they use those insoluble fibers like on keto foods, don't they? Because they just jam the fiber in via this non-soluble version, and thus it's not a carb that your body's digesting.
Yep. And those are the non-solubles, because you can see as the soluble fibers, the body can sometimes look at them because of a saccharide form, and they can produce like a slight insulin response. But it's not just like artificial sweeteners will do that too. Like because they taste sweet, they will trigger an insulin response from your pancreas, not because they're actually they don't have any glucose whatsoever inside of them, but your body thinks they do. So therefore it has a bit of a response from your pancreas, which is why you shouldn't eat artificially sweetened beverages when you're fasting. Some people are like, yeah, I can drink like a Diet Coke when I'm fasting or whatever. And I'm like, not a great idea.
I tested my blood glucose once.
You're tricking your body a little.
I tested my blood glucose when I would drink artificially sweetened stuff, and many times it would go down.
Well, it's because if you can think about it this way, your body's thinking it's getting sugar, therefore it's releasing insulin. So whatever's tied up in whatever's in your bloodstream will be shuttled directly to your muscles. So your blood sugar would drop down because you're not introducing any extra glucose or sugars into your bloodstream. So that insulin's gonna get shuttled. It's gonna get bound to whatever sugar's in your bloodstream at the moment. So it would bring your blood sugar down. It's a good example of what I was just saying. Your pancreas is getting turned on. Your insulin is getting, which you don't want when you're fasting. So that's why I tell people don't use artificial sweeteners when you're fasting. Just stick to water. Nothing with taste. Don't turn your taste buds on. Your taste buds turn your gallbladder on, your pancreas on. It gets the whole thing started. Same with smells. So stay away from them. So prebiotics are really important, guys. Yeah, fats are next. So we're done here. We hear about probiotics and microbiome, the gut microbiome. What is the gut microbiome?
I feel like the more I listen to that, they don't have answers. They don't know. I don't think they've scratched the surface on their knowledge of the microbiome.
Well, they used to call it before gut microbiome came along. That terminology is the hip way of calling it. They used to call it a gut flora. And if you can think about like a flora, it's very much like the soil you grow plants in. And when I was working in cannabis, the best weed was grown with soil that had an awesome flora in it. So soil is a living medium. There's little bugs in there. There's all kinds of creatures that are digesting stuff inside, earthworms. We've all heard of that they're good. So this no different from our intestines. And that's why we call them bugs. there are all these little bacterias, and some of them are good and some of them are bad. So when you hear people going on like parasite cleanses, this is what they're talking about, getting rid of stuff in their gut microbiome that are bad, right? Like candida. Like you don't want candida in there. It'll produce all kinds of autoimmune stuff. You can have Crohn's, you can have skin conditions, you can have brain fog from having candida, and there's not a lot of testing to show whether you have it or not. These bugs eat non-soluble fiber. They don't like sugars. They don't like those fibers are sugars. If you see that there's saccharide at the end of it, we just don't digest them. They do, and they eat them. So you want to be able to eat foods that have insoluble or soluble fiber in them, and most do. Like fruits and vegetables are going to have a pretty good balance between like insoluble and soluble fiber. So when you do eat, and that's why it's important to eat fiber, and if you don't eat a lot of vegetables, then you have to be eating the gristle on your steaks. You have to be eating the cartilage on your chicken wings. Like you can't just be eating meat on a carnivore diet. Your flora is going to suffer for that. So when I bring up serotonin, 90% or 70, 80% of that's made in on the cell lining of your small intestine. Your gut flora is very important for your digestion, how you're going to absorb foods, because that is like the last part of the digestion that is like, if you can think about cows, they have 3 stomachs, right? So one stomach digests to a certain point, and it gets put back in the mouth as cud. And then the cow chews that up, and then it goes to the next stomach, right? And that stomach, it ferments a little bit, right? Basically, the sugars are breaking down. And then it goes to the third, I think it's the third stomach. That is essentially what we're doing in our small intestine. There's a bit of fermentation going on. There's a bit of, and that's why poop smells, It's because that's the process that's occurring there. And that's why having a gut flora is so important. And that's why people do like a stool, what's it called? Where they take someone else's stool and they implant.
Oh my word, there's a South Park episode on that one.
It's true, because we have blown out floras. A lot of people do, because they just don't have good, and they don't have good microfloras. And then they're eating sushi on the weekends with their girlfriends and raw fish and stuff, and they don't have the flora to handle that. And then that can manifest in candida in their intestines and stuff, because they don't know how to digest that. They don't have the proper bugs to take care of that raw fish, right? So you can't do both, guys.
Does doing a cleanse like affect your good bacteria too?
Mm-hmm.
Like in a negative way?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. There's really no way to. This is what they do with cleanses. So when they cleanse everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like nuking it with antibiotics in a lot of ways. And some cleanses, like, they claim to just go after the bad stuff, which is kind of ridiculous. Some stuff will die. Most of it will die. When you come back off of a cleanse, you repopulate with a probiotic, either in a pill form. There's lots of different probiotics. I like the ones with a mixture from fermented vegetables, like a sauerkraut, kimchi, and then also milk derived products, like a Greek yogurt or a kefir. Those are going to be high in acidophilus, lactoacidophilus. They're different probiotics, and those little guys you repopulate your intestines with, and then you're able to start anew with a new flora. And that takes a little while to reach homeostasis. But there's no point in continuing to take probiotics daily. I mean, if you are, then just eat like a Greek yogurt or have some kimchi or something like that. But spending a bunch of money on like pill form probiotics has been shown. They've done a lot of testing on this. Your probiotics do a little bump and they come down because your body's reached a homeostasis on this. So what you're doing is you're almost like adding more warriors into the battlefield, but you're not giving them any weapons and you're not giving them any food. So they just die off. All they're doing is dying off every time you do it. What you do want to do is have a prebiotic if you don't eat a lot of fruits or vegetables, so that you do feed your warriors, and then they will grow. They will have babies, and they will grow like they're supposed to. And there's no need to keep adding in repopulating because your population's strong and it's giving birth to new babies, and you don't need to repopulate it anymore. But don't tell that to the probiotic companies because they'll go out of business. They won't like me very much. So, in a nutshell, we think about carbohydrates and sugars. A lot of people think about them as being like two different things, or like they're interchangeable. Carbohydrate is sugar, simple carbs, simple sugars, complex carbs, complex sugars, right? If you think about sugars and carbohydrates, as like I did the example of a sweet potato or a grain of rice, or these natural embodiments of carbohydrates, which are higher sugary items, there are protein in these items. There's protein in sweet potato. There's a little bit of protein in most things. Not a lot, but there's a little bit. It's just mainly carbohydrates, right? Unless it's a Gatorade or something that has been highly, or like bees honey or something like that, that has been processed. The complex carbs are binding sugars in fiber and starch. The body has to take that apart. It takes effort, it takes time, and it's a slower uptake.
It's going to be more satiating too for the weight loss topic.
Because it lasts longer, right? Your body has to spend more time digesting it. It's not in and out. Fiber is going to do that, right? Complex, real, that's why I said real stuff like potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, anything that's natural, that's got fiber in it, it's going to take longer to digest and to feel more satiated. The more we break these things down into, like, say, fruits, which are much higher in sugars, the quicker you're going to metabolize those, right? There's more sugar in them. There's more fructose. There's more sucrose in them. These are simple sugars. Your body's going to absorb them very quickly. So if you're coming off of a workout and you need sugar quickly, but you don't want a Gatorade, you don't want this, eat some pineapple, have some strawberries, eat some blueberries, right? Have some honey, something like that. It's a great way to get your glycogen stores up without having to go down. But there's really there's nothing wrong with the Gatorade after a workout. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, maybe the red 40 or whatever is probably not great for you, but the rest of it's fine, So think about carbs like that. They're broken down in starches, fibers, and then sugars, guys.
And they're not the devil like the keto and carnivore people make them out to be.
They're not. We just don't know how. We just eat a lot of them, and a lot of them are highly processed.
Yeah, and that goes back to the calories conversation we brought up at the beginning, because ultimately it is a battle of calories in and calories out. It's math. And to lose weight, you need to be under the calorie amount, because you can't gain weight off nothing.
Right, and some calories take more effort to digest.
So protein,
therefore they burn more.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a thermal index to some calories. Take more calories to burn, which means they actually equal to less calories.
Yeah.
So if I eat like 1,000 calories of meat, it's going to out of that 1,000 calories, it may take my body,
I feel like
100 calories to burn that.
I feel like when they put the calories on the label, though, they're factoring that in to help it make it look better, aren't they?
I don't know. That would be a devious thing if they did. I don't think they can, because I don't think they would go across the board for everybody.
So. Yeah,
because everyone would have a different thermal index. Some people might digest it more efficiently.
Isn't the determination of a calorie just, don't they literally like burn?
Yeah, it's like the BTU.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it's kind of a universal standard.
Right. But that's a really good point, because some calories are worth more than others.
Yeah, to some extent.
Yeah, they're worth more than others.
I think as far like why carbs are so demonized on the internet is because I think the majority of the culture is eating very simple, highly eat a
bag of Doritos every day.
Highly palatable carbs that you get fat off of. But if it's not the carbs' fault, it's your overeating of the carb. And go try to eat 500 calories of like sweet potatoes versus 500 calories of like Oreos, and tell me how full you are.
How easy it is.
Yeah,
I think that's the bane existence of like even me eating 300 grams of white rice today. I'm just like, it's a lot of work. It's rigorous, it's rigorous, and it's not easy to do, and it definitely shows you the difference between like what a calorie is worth. You're even spending more calories chewing, you're spending more calories at the table, just shoveling it in.
And I think that's why people like the keto diet I lost a lot of weight on it, like I said in the last podcast. And like, it's not because of the low carb, I think, that I lost weight. It's just that fats and protein are very satiating, and it's very hard to overeat those versus a carb.
Right.
So the result is like just less calories because of the macronutrients,
And
not
then,
because
yeah.
the carbs are bad.
Yeah, and then you have the thermal index of digesting all that,
Mhm.
which is much higher than a carbohydrate. And most people that are like on high carbohydrate diets, most of America, for instance, you have messed up these two hormones. These two hormones are super important, which is what's the new magic? Ozempic. This is what Ozempic does. Okay, you have ghrelin, and then you have leptin. Ghrelin's responsible for telling you that you're full. Leptin's the one that says you're hungry. So it moderates those two. When you have and that's what Ozempic does. It basically says, hey, you're full. You don't need to eat, right? So it moderates these hormones that tell you full, hungry, ghrelin, leptin. When you eat a lot of carbohydrates and you eat a lot of processed foods, those hormones go right into crazyville. And that's why you'll see people eat like a whole bag of chips and be like, I'm ready for another bag of chips, right? Because their ghrelin isn't kicking in. It's not telling them that they're satiated. It's like, you're still hungry. You need to eat more. And when you eat a high carb diet like that, you're not supposed to processed, you put all that out of whack. You really do. And it's dangerous to play with, because coming off of that and dealing with that, lack of homeostasis between your leptin and your ghrelin will leave you feeling awful, like you're starving and in a terrible position, because you're constantly feeling like you need food because your body's like, we're dying. Anyways, guys, deep dive into this. Hope you understand a little bit more about what carbohydrates are and what sugars are, and get an idea for the breakdown, digestion, the way to look at a carbohydrate: complex, simple carbs, complex carbs, simple sugars bound together, chemical bonds, body has to take them apart, slower absorption. The GI scale, it's a great tool to use when you're looking at different fruits. How fast is this absorbed? Sweetness not being a great indicator of is this high in the glycemic index? Is this going to absorb super fast? It's just an indicator of how much fructose is in it. Fructose, high fructose corn syrup, not the devil. It's just more fructose in a glucose mixture. Okay. Glucose gets stored as glycogen. Glycogen then releases it as glucose again in your muscles. It's the building block of all sugars. That's what your body is working so hard to produce. That's what your liver produces in the morning when you have to get up out of bed. So you have energy stores. So those are carbohydrates, guys. Treating with respect. Hope you guys learned something today.
Next time will be fats.
I can't wait for that discussion.
Yeah. Tune in probably next week or something.
Yes.